So, the other day, I was playing the new Wii Sports on the Switch 2 with my fiancé. Great console, by the way, and there definitely will be a video on it coming soon. But then it suddenly hit me. What happened to the Xbox Kinect? Sure, it rarely worked, and it had the same resolution of my Nan, and it was ridiculously expensive. However, thinking back on it, Xbox might have actually been onto something, and really, they might have actually been ahead of its time. For those who are wondering what I'm talking about, the Xbox Kinect was this super slick but also clunky webcam looking device which could sense motion, and it would use that motion as an input to power your games. Think about it like a Wii without the controllers in your hand. It was developed by Microsoft and launched in 2010 for the Xbox 360. Later, they then released a second modified version for the Xbox One in 2013. It worked by using a camera which mapped 3D depth, ultimately making games feel way more immersive. Using a combination of infrared projectors, sensors, and cameras to create a 3D map of the room, it would then analyze the distortion of an invisible infrared dot pattern. The Kinect would then build a real-time skeleton model of the player to interpret gestures and movements. Sounds innovative, right? Groundbreaking stuff. So why did they discontinue it in 2017? On release, the Kinect would set you back about 130 quid in the UK, or $150 to my North American viewers. If you were to combine this with the actual cost of the Xbox at the time, well, here's the first catch. You actually needed to have the premium version of the Xbox 360, the 20 gig hard drive to install it and use it effectively, which was about £279 in the UK, but a whopping $400 in the US. Sorry guys. In addition, you need a controller, so let's call it another $50 or £50 on top of that. That brings us to £459 UK or $600 in the US. And that's before you've even played the game. Speaking of games, so what were your options? Well, that's a bit more of a technical question, so let's split them into three distinct categories. First up, you have the digital games, which are often smaller product games you could also maybe display on your phone or tablet, which naturally lent their game style to the Kinect. It wasn't intentionally developed with a Kinect in mind. You may remember games such as Fruit Ninja, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Doodle Jump, which is everyone's classic. And then you have your better with Kinect games, which are normal AAA games which pair nicely with the Kinect and have some aspects which were modified to suit the Kinect playing style. But once again, these were intentionally developed with Kinect in mind. Think your Forza, Harry Potter, Madden, NBA 2K, and then we get to the final category, the games which are being designed specifically with Kinect in mind, or Kinect games. Think about them such as Kinect Sports, Zumba Fitness, Just Dance, even Dragon Ball Z was developed specifically with the Kinect in mind. So plenty of games to keep you entertained. And although they wasn't as expensive as games today, in total it still increased by about £50 or $50. So that brings us to £509 in the UK or £650 in the US. And if we were now to add to the £120 or $120 for the Xbox Live yearly on top of it, that will bring you to a final cost of £629 in the UK and $720 in the US. Given the inflation from 2010 to today, that money is actually worth around about $1,000 or £1,000 in the UK. So yeah, still a lot of money. But that ties in nicely into what actually happened with the Kinect and why Microsoft made the decision to discontinue it in 2017. As you can see, money and the sheer cost of setup was already one major hurdle for Xbox and Microsoft. Microsoft could come up with the idea to force bundle every Xbox One and launch with the Kinect, which pushed the console's price to £500, which was £100 more expensive than PlayStation PS4 at the time, ultimately making this an ineffective pricing model. For reference, Sony sold around 1 million units in its first 48 hours, compared to just 700,000 by Xbox. The second reason, which is actually quite surprising if you think about it. But it wasn't about the games itself, it was about the gamers. Yes, for once we were the problem. Hardcore gamers and major developers largely rejected the idea of the hardware, as it primarily supported casual, family-oriented games. Many players found the motion controls to be gimmicky or frustrating compared to traditional controllers. I mentioned at the start that it was clunky, and in 2013, the Xbox One version really didn't help. The sensor required a large amount of open physical space in the living room, which provided to be a high barrier for entry to many users. And finally, the lack of demand was the final nail in the coffin. As consumer interest evaporated, Microsoft unbundled the Kinect from the Xbox One and dropped it entirely from subsequent hardware updates, like the Xbox Series S or the Xbox Series S. All these reasons combined ultimately led to Microsoft making the decision to discontinue the Kinect in 2017. So, in summary, by now you're probably wondering what happened to the tech and what's next for Microsoft, and also the future of immersive gaming as a whole. Following this removal from the consumer market, Microsoft actually repurposed the Kinect technology for the enterprise and AI sector as the Azure Collect Developer Kit. However, Microsoft has now ceased production on this line as well. On the market now, the closest true spiritual successor to the Xbox Kinect is the Next Playground. It is a standalone, controller-free console equipped with built-in AI computer vision that tracks player movement and facial expressions. Alternatively, modern AR such as VR headsets like the Meta Quest 3 offer elite, controller-free hand and body tracking. So, some really exciting stuff in the pipeline. And do I personally think about Microsoft or Xbox will ever attempt something like this again? Almost certainly. And will I be buying it? You can bet your house on it. The thing is, innovation and risk-taking is what ultimately pushes the industry forward. So kudos to any organization, whether it's Xbox, PlayStation or Nintendo, which takes the leap of faith first. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.